I do think this is a great time because we're going to wrap all of these threads of conversation up in what Doublelift was saying this past week. So not only, by the way, I do think it's hilarious that Doublelift is like leaking the TSM roster before they can announce it, which by the way is just purely to piss TSM off, which beautiful. Really enjoyed that one. But then the other thing he said during that leak was that, oh my God, Thorin, LCS dying. What a heinous insult straight to the heart of the TSM or the LCS leadership, the LCS producers. It is illegal to say that if you are a co-streamer.
And what I love about it is this. I just love the fact that, like, listen, right? If you were to think tactically how you would deal with someone who's one of the biggest, by the way, he essentially is North American League of Legends. Like, Doublelift just is. Aside from Bjergsen, who's a fucking foreigner, Doublelift is North American League of Legends.
He's the best American player of all time.
Yeah, like, the joke is he is the protagonist of LCS, isn't he? Like, the story basically was his fucking story, right? You take that guy saying in some sort of like, you know, fucking like Babylon writing on the wall moment, like, wow, LCS might be dying, right? Remove his co-streaming so that the viewership goes down even more. Like, you can't. That's what I love about Riot. They're so predictably stupid, Monty. Like, they will always, every time. It's like Riot here's like, what's going on? Cut off our nose to spite our face. That'll teach our face. Every time they do that move, like, it's so dumb, isn't it? Because also, by the way, it just makes you look mega insecure. You're on like the Simpsons shit, like paddling, talking about paddling. That's a paddling. Like, why is Riot always like this? They're such a parody of themselves.
By the way, it's so funny because their advertisement is always, we're the most player-focused company in the world. That is their company mantra, guys. So what would the players like? Would the players like Doublelift, our biggest co-streamer, not to be able to co-stream? Surely the players will love that one. Would they like Monte Cristo, the most popular caster, to not be able to cast international events because he stood up for his own wages? Yeah, surely the fans will love that. They're not about the players, guys. They're about their own fucking petty grievances, and they always have been. They never can rise above it. These people who are the same people year after year after year because they just sit in these jobs and they never get fired for the LCS's viewership dying or for any of their garbage decisions that they've made over the last decade. So here we go, guys. Here we go again.
You a funny aside. I've got a funny little sidebar. It'll be quick. It's an anecdote that people might know the beginning of, but they don't know how it connects. Right? Years and years and years ago, because here's another thing people don't get. You know, when people like Richard Lewis battle against Riot, and people think like, well, he's just speculating. Right? Richard Lewis has known loads of people who worked in Riot. Like, as we always say, there are some like legit / tenured / cool people in Riot, and guess what? They also want the shit to get out there that's dodgy and be exposed. So what they do is they go to people like Richard and they give them information. So one thing Richard knew from years ago that's hilarious about Riot is, in the early days, Monty, they really were on some like fucking like J. Edgar Hoover level shit where they had dossiers on everyone. And he said, for real, if anyone famous tweeted about Riot, that they would get the tweet. This is real. He said they would print it out and it would go in a folder. And obviously my joke was that I must have my own fucking like drawer. Like tweets I've done. I've done too many, haven't I? So the premise is this, right? The reason why I thought of that though, because I remember him telling me and I was like, that is plausible because they are sort of a bit paranoid like that. But at the same time, who cares? But then I remembered this detail. Do you remember that anecdote I've told in public previously? Because Riot always tries to pretend like I'm a bad guy and like all that, right? I told that story that they back-channeled once and basically offered me like, if you do this, you'll do Worlds at one point. And I didn't even think of this at the time, dude. The one thing they wanted, fans, in exchange for doing Worlds was just no criticism on Twitter for 2 years. And I never put two and two together. Like, so what I never thought is this, Monty, why would that be worth it on their end? Dude, that's how triggered they get just about being talked about in public. That basically they just wanted 2 years of radio silence. To me, I'd be like, who gives a fuck about Twitter? But that's who Riot is. Like, if you don't understand, by the way, this essentially bleeds into that topic that we did about Valorant and DDK and Sean Gares. One of Riot's biggest problems, and it's why they will never convince legit people they aren't tyrants, it's because they have the number one flaw of tyrants, which is because you have ultimate power. The second someone in any tiny capacity annoys you, you fucking behead them. And when you do that, you show you are a tyrant. So the one thing they always do is they always overreact like this in the most petty way. They can never take the high road, Monty. They never do.
So
and they hate criticism, even if it's legit. Even if it's totally legit, they hate it. They hate it so much, mate.
And by the way, guys, LCS is dying. There isn't another way to put it. And I understand why they flip out when Doublelift says LCS is dying. He probably has a contract that says if he co-streams that he has a non-disparagement clause. He can't say bad things about the league, right? But the thing is,
also more likely to go mainstream if he says it, mate. If I say it, it's not going to be in the Washington Post. They might write an article like, main co-streamer says league's dying. That would be a fucking terrible headline.
Yeah, but here's the thing: Riot can't punish him because it's true. And if the sponsors can't see that, you can literally see, go to ES charts every year, average concurrent viewership going down, spring to spring, summer to summer. Guys, we were around. We saw the 2015 CLG versus TSM games with 400,000 concurrent viewers. That literally never happens anymore, even for finals. It's been,
nowadays for someone like that, like the biggest match. What would it usually be now?
I can look. It was 50. Yeah, probably around there. We can look at what the finals were for the spring season. But yeah, it's basically, it's not that difficult to see that these things are going down. And so the sponsors, like the fact that they try and cover this up is so confusing to me because it's so easy to find this information, and they must think that their sponsor partners are so stupid in order for this to occur, in order for them to be able to bury this, right? So I actually don't understand the point about all of this. It doesn't even feel like they're trying to fix the issue.
Is this though, Monte? I think a side angle, though, that's probably worth mentioning is, you notice we're talking about like average viewership, for example. If anyone doesn't know, loads of the esports companies a few years ago magically went away from the raw viewership number and they started doing things like viewed hours and stuff. So that means, by the way, you can sort of fudge these numbers if you do a different category by doing stuff like holding a lock-in tournament. Like there's a bunch more games you can create and more hours to be watched. But so I assume that's how they get away with it now. I assume they just changed the Excel sheet a bit, but you can't do that forever.
Last split, the peak viewership was 387,000 for the grand finals. Now, TSM versus CLG used to be 400K just for a regular season game, right? The average viewers last split was 123,000, including co-streaming. This split, guys, it's 82,000 concurrent viewers on average. This viewership is bad. It is very bad for the league, and there's not really a way to spin this. And so he didn't make any kind of judgment about the LCS. He didn't say LCS is bad. He didn't say, oh, this product is garbage. He just said that it's dying, which is true. This is what dying viewership looks like. Didn't say it couldn't be revived. Didn't say it couldn't go up again. But as it stands right now, it's just true that it's dying. It's just true. And then they punished him.
But I think they also punished him because he also mentioned the Bjergsen thing with the fucking
Mr. Beast, which by the way was ridiculous.
Again, just being petty in it.
So I understand the league's perspective because you have to be able to control where the players play. Otherwise, LCS loses value.
Yeah, of course.
Even if it was a charity event like it did, people are like, "Oh, it should have been done for charity." Here's the thing.
Has to get approved. Yes.
You can't do every charity event because there are going to be businesses that run charity events just to get your players, to get viewership, to drive other business initiatives later on. It can be used really maliciously.
Sponsorship is based on some form of exclusivity. Like you have the rights to this person in this domain. So if fans don't get it, if you just go and play another product, you are essentially devaluing your sponsors, what you've sold them, the deliverables. Yeah. That's true.
So I don't blame Riot for not letting Bjergsen go.
Sure.
But at the same time, this Doublelift is correct. This is an opportunity to reach a new audience because Mr. Beast is absolutely fucking enormous, and Ninja also obviously. Although I don't think Ninja would have brought new viewers to or players to League of Legends, considering he streams it a bunch and he's like, he's in the esports world, so people who are already there.
I normally don't care about streamer clips, but do yourself a favor if you never have and go and look up the highlight video of when Ninja first played League of Legends. And if you don't know, within like half an hour, he is unironically doing that thing where he is just screaming at his monitor, like, "What are you doing?" Like, he just becomes a league player with it. Like, it's amazing. It's actually amazing. The way he molds is so good because he does that. Because the thing is, I've always said this as well, Monty. Remember, I come from a game that in theory is supposed to be super toxic, CSGO and FPS games. But the difference is there's almost like a lightheartedness to the shit talking in those games. There's something about League, the game, I've always said. It's not that toxic people play League. League makes you toxic. There's something about League where you don't even just say like you're fucking the game up. You actually start like trying to like hurt the person's feelings and like get to who they are. And it's a fucked up game. It just makes you, but it's like going to prison. It just changes a man. Just League of Legends. That's why I would absolutely. I'd have like all those images like League of Legends, not even once. Like it's fucking off, isn't it?
Yeah.
But watch that highlight video. It's so good. It's so good.
But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that you're going to convince people if Bjergsen plays even with Mr. Beast. It's not going to be like some watershed moment where 1 million people suddenly join the North American server. The viewership wasn't even that good. I guess I think it was like 100K or something, which is like good, but I don't really see how that would have helped. But outside of this one event, I do agree with Doublelift's principle, which is that they should be using their players in scenarios like this, or be identifying ways to drive their player base with larger influencers, right? The problem is they have to pay these people a lot of money, and they're afraid of the influencers taking control of a lot of the narratives, which is exactly why they didn't like Doublelift doing what he was doing.
Again, one of the things they're afraid of is this. Let's say I partner with a big influencer, but then in a year from now, like use the example you gave before. I mean, listen, Valve doesn't do this, to be fair. Valve don't do that. But let's imagine a world where Valve was like that, or Blizzard or something. The rival company then pays the same influencer and takes his fan base. Like, that's why Riot's the ultimate fucking... Basically, the joke is, if Riot was a human, they had their heart broken in fucking high school, and they've never been able to have a normal relationship since. And they carry that baggage with them. And the worst part is, if you're a new spouse or partner, you have to somehow know, without them telling you, their fucked up baggage and history, or you'll never be able to actually get to who they are as a person. So as a result, they can't trust anyone, and they can never... The premise with them is, like, when I say they don't share power, I don't mean it to sound cool. It actually fucks them as well, because they can't ever trust anyone. They can't ever have any proper partnerships. They can't build anything new or epic. Like, essentially, it actually ends up being a limiting factor for them, in my opinion, in the long run.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting was that we saw actually that the player base of the NA server really hasn't changed substantially. So it's still approximately in the same place it was a few years ago, because if there was a decline in the actual player base in NA, well, that might explain, for instance, a decline in esports viewership. In fact, over the pandemic, as you would expect, player base went up because more people were playing video games. They weren't going out. So they saw a bump, and it's now kind of back down to the level it was a few years ago. But this goes to show that the LCS viewership problem is a problem created by the LCS itself.
I actually have a question, because this is one thing I've never seen anyone do. Everyone gives you these raw stats for like average viewers and stuff. I want to know the breakdown demographically, because here's the angle I would be very interested in, Monte. If you asked me to spitball reasons now why LCS would have less viewership in 2022, the number one reason I would say is this. When I first began in League of Legends, Monte, I used to be really shocked that all my friends and people I knew who were from League, they were all watching like TSM and CLG, and I was like, one, didn't you tell me like they're worse than Moscow 5? And two, why are you watching the American League? Like, we're in Europe, just watch it. But the premise was they used to watch Europe and North America. In the modern day, by the way, I don't know anyone who watches LCS who's an LEC fan, mate.
Why would you?
No one does. No, exactly. So the problem is, and there's not even, as you mentioned, there's not even the sort of hype storyline of like, well, it's CLG, TSM, I've got to watch that. That doesn't exist anymore in League of Legends. Like, there is no rivalry like that. So I get the sense personally, LEC fans don't watch that. I think basically the only people who watch LCS is Americans. That's it. So I think you've also chopped it off your viewer base almost, you know, because I used to get the vibe back then. Lots of LEC and EU LCS fans tuned in for at least the big game, you know.
Well, I mean, here's another problem. At least back in the day, before the LCS and LEC started, there were at least more international competitions between NA and EU. Like, we keep harping on this, but there's only been a handful of NA versus EU best of fives over the last several years.
Well, we're going to get people to care more, yeah, for sure, if they interact.
And like, we didn't even get that at the last MSI either, because G2 and EG were on opposite side of the brackets. Now, we did kind of get a de facto like BO5 from G2 and EG being in the same group, and then getting into the same, and then they were in the Rumble stage together. So we did actually see 6 games between these two teams, 5 or 6. 6.
I think it was 6, wasn't it?
Yeah, we saw 6. So that was kind of a best of 5 in a way, but it wasn't an elimination match. So Riot, due to their own system, has stripped out all of the NA versus EU rivalry, which probably would create more interest from EU fans and NA teams, right? Because now they just don't have to care at all. They just never play them. And they haven't done anything like the region itself in LCS has not been competitive internationally. The broadcast has been really bad in terms of quality and content and player storylines. And so it's just more or less a disaster all around. You don't have the competitive advantage. You don't have the server size, although that hasn't appeared to change much now that we've seen some of the numbers on that. And it's kind of plateau over the last few years. They're not losing players, but they're not really gaining players either. And it really is the LCS's fault. Now, you can point fingers at Riot for being bad at producing the league. You can point fingers at the teams for not being competitive or for running budget rosters as they sit upon their $10 million investment and refuse to put more money into it because they know that there's no difference between 6th and 10th place. So there's no motivation for them to climb in the standings unless they're going to Worlds, basically. But the system is hugely flawed, and it was entirely designed by Riot, and it's being entirely supported by Riot. And ultimately, they have to take responsibility because the player base hasn't really changed all that much, it appears. So the blame is solely up.
By the way, obviously those are all, I would say some of them are like more obvious or surface level things. What I would ask is this: do you think any factor at all is also like the level of play being bad? Do you think does that matter? If the play was bad, would that affect any of these other factors?
Look, NA has always been bad. So either the only choice you have is that finally fans became undiluted and they don't listen to Reggie lying, saying that TSM their goal is to win Worlds anymore, which was always ridiculous on its face. But some people bought into that. Or you just have it that nobody actually cares about the teams or the players in this league. Certainly, there are sports leagues all over the world that have ardent, diehard fans. Just because MLB exists doesn't mean there aren't a bunch of fans of the Japanese and Korean baseball leagues that feed into MLB. Just because there's the NHL doesn't mean that there aren't fans of the Russian hockey leagues or the Nordic hockey leagues, right? So I can only conclude that people would be fans of LCS because it's convenient in their time zone, and if it was actually presented better. And I don't know how big of a factor competitive quality actually is on an international level, because remember, there's hardly any international competition. 90% of the year is just LCS. So if you liked LCS for reasons, you wouldn't really care about how well the teams did internationally, right? That makes sense to me, at least. So there must be other problems.
Sure.
I just don't see it as international success. And also, you have to take the example of Europe, right? Sure, Europe's done better. You know, they made a couple World Finals, but that was several years ago now, and they got blown the fuck out in those finals. Yeah, they won an MSI. That was a while back now too. But what LEC continues to be successful, even though their teams don't win international competitions and haven't won or haven't even appeared in finals for years. So they are clearly having not as severe a performance problem, but they're still having a problem. So what does that mean? Well, frankly, LEC is much more fun to watch than LCS. Like, they do a better job producing it. The storylines are told better. The players have more personality. Even the ads in LEC are more fun to watch. Like, they do a good job with the Kia and the Kit Kat stuff that makes it all feel integrated and part of a whole, and it makes it feel fun. And like, LCS is just not fun. It's not fun to watch at any level. The gameplay is atrocious. The games are bad. I don't go into the LCS being like, well, I'm going to have fun watching this today. Whereas LEC, I'm like, well, I'm going to see some pretty good games, and I'm going to get to watch these players who have a lot of personality, whose stories are told. And then I don't know what's going to come up on the broadcast because there's going to be all these fun elements thrown in that are going to surprise me.
I think you can't have that with LCS, though. By the way, not obviously in a literal sense, you absolutely could. I mean, like, functionally with Riot, I don't think you can have that. And the reason why, to look back to what I was talking about with the Reginald situation, Riot really are people Riot are petty people with a stick up their arse on every issue. That sort of person, you can't have fun with that person.
Yep.
You can't lightheartedly poke fun at them or make some crazy thing. Like, there's always going to be, you went over the line. Like if I give people an analogy, if you know in CSGO, this is why in CSGO, CSGO, while ESL was maybe the best at being like the professional TO, famously, the reason people used to love DreamHack is DreamHack was more the me and Richard vibe of the banter and a bit more sort of the gamer ethos and where gaming came from. And so the problem with that is this. That was fine for ESL and CSGO because they didn't have to do that. They already had the audience. They were the number one people. They could fit the identity of we're the most professional broadcast. The problem LCS has is this, Monty. They cannot do the banter thing, which is what everyone wants, which is what LEC is. And they can't also be the best broadcast because they have the worst product to show. And then they also have no identity. Like, you don't watch the LCS and go, wow, this is the peak of LCS, of esports production. Like, look at the things they're doing here. This is innovative. You don't. You go, this is a fairly actually sort of paint by numbers broadcast. It's not bad, but it's not the best. That's why I always bring it back to this. There is no identity to the LCS on any level. Its only identity is it's just North American orgs. That's it. It's not even players. It's got no, like, if I asked a random fan, tell me 3 adjectives about LCS, mate, what are they even going to say? I don't know. I don't even know what they would say. What would they possibly come up with? Because here's the difference, as we're pointing out. If you said, give me 3 adjectives for LEC, the first ones would be like fun, banter, like all sorts of shit like that. Like, they'd immediately be, for LCS, like, the joke is you can't even say anything because, like, it's all nouns. You'd have to say, like, Bjergsen, like that's like all you have. There's nothing. Reggie, like, that's it.
I think too, like, you just, it's just a feel thing for me. When I watch LEC and they integrate the professional players, like when Perk starts casting a game, or when they do an interview and they're in the post show, right, in the post game lobby or whatever they call it, the players look like they're having fun being there, and it looks like they have a relationship with the talent, with the casters, with the interviewers.
Yeah.
And you can tell that everybody really cares about what is being said, how it's being presented. The players
on LEC, I get the vibe, know they're part of the show. Do you know what I mean? Like, if they bring like Oduami on the pod, the reason he won't get offended, he knows he's part of the show. He's sort of trying to tell the story of the show.
He feels really comfortable.
Yeah.
I do not get the sense when I watch LCS that anybody has a rapport with a player. The interviews are
They look like they never met the player. Like, it's literally like, the joke is every interview may as well be like Latigris and Danny, and it looks like someone's just met someone on a school trip. Like, what about you, little boy? Why are you here at Beamish Museum? Like, it doesn't look like a pro that you know. Like, hey, how you doing, Danny? What's going on? Like, doesn't have that vibe, does it? I hate the way I'm just a fucking teenager on this episode. Like, I don't know, Monty. Voice break.
The ecosystem of the LEC, from the player streams, like when Yanko streams and then he comes onto the show, it all feels like part of one whole universe, right? It feels like Jankos can go off and do his own thing and be fun, and then he shows up and he's the same kind of fun, bubbly guy on the interviews, and then we have the players coming in and, like, you know, being really supported by the casters in order to give their takes, which, by the way, we saw in LCS with Huni this week, which was better. I will say it was better. I thought Huni looked very comfortable, but it just seems like there isn't a divide between the broadcast and the personalities of the player, but LCS is just one giant chasm where it just doesn't feel real at all. It just feels fake as fuck.
I really appreciate just like the sheer fucking like bigotry of low expectations of everyone in LCS, that they're like, you know, Hooney's like fairly fluent now. The motherfucker came to Europe in 2015, 7 years ago, and has been paid millions of dollars. There was only 1 year he was in Korea that time. Like, what? Like, yeah, and you're impressed he can go like, can I have a Mars bar, please? Like, are you fucking kidding me? I would expect he should be even better than that.
Well, I actually think Hoodie's quite good at English, and like he was almost instantly
how
too.
Many years?
I mean, he's got the slang, he's got the banter. Like, I love Hoodie. I thought he did a really funny job on the broadcast. It certainly was entertaining for me. But this is all them stealing pages from the LEC playbook, and is not anything new. Like, here's a news flash for you LCS producers. You can't just do the same thing as LEC, because they're going to be better than you at it. That's not a choice you can make. That's not going to increase your viewership. You need to be your own unique thing that people care about, not the worst version of LEC.
That's what I love, though, dude, because I used to also get that so many times in the early years of League of Legends. Like, thing about you, Thorin, is you're just salty that you know Riot would never let you within 100 miles of a broadcast. The joke is, you moron, they did sort of like a Thorin light version. It's called the LEC, you idiot. It's probably the most popular product they've ever created. You morons.
So
that's why the real shit. I'll tell you a little sidebar because people might be interested in this, Monty. The real fucking what if in history, if we could like go back in a time machine and do things differently, that could have changed League of Legends. Because I'll tell this info. It's an anecdote of Monty's, but I won't like reveal any fucking secret shit. I won't say who he was talking to. But basically, once upon a time, you all know Monty used to work with ESL, and ESL used to do IEMs, right? They used to have the IEM in Katowice and San Jose and Katowice. Well, sometimes they had the European ones like Cologne, etc. They had the 2 or 3 a year. If you remember, they'd also have like a random Asian one with Asian teams. And if you remember, Riot immediately gimped them because they made it so you could never have like the 8 teams from the LCS. You had to have like 4 LCS teams, 2 amateur, 1 from Turkey, and 1 from fucking other shithole that no one cares about. And you'd have to have like a sort of a scuffed set of teams so that even if you did the broadcast better than them, you can't really beat LCS. You can't beat their product, right? So because Monte was working with IEM, ESL basically said to Monte, like, we want to actually like brand ourselves that we're not like the LCS. We're like what League could be if someone else ran it, basically. And they said to Monte, is why I'm hiding the identities. They said to Monte, basically, like, what could we do that would really like blow it out the water? What would really change League of Legends? And your idea, by the way, like I say, if you know now what's happened, your idea was fire. It's just, you have to understand, he was saying this to ESL. And let's just say this was in the years I didn't work with ESL. Because Monte's suggestion was a brilliant one, but it never would have been approved by anyone. It was just bring Thorin on the League of Legends broadcast of ESL. Like, obviously, if the desk was me and Monte from like 2015 on, it would be a bit of a game changer. I think you would maybe get a little bit of a different vibe.
It's even funnier than that, Thorin, because they told me that they wanted me to have like even more aggressive hot takes because they wanted to have a different sense of the desk than the LCS. So they wanted me to be really mean. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do that, but you know how you could do that. Why don't we bring Thorin on? Because remember, this is actually hilarious. This was the time period when Riot was making Primetime League and they were spending millions and millions of dollars doing this show, and Summoning Insight with like 2 webcams was like quadrupling their viewership, and they were omega salty about it. I mean, it's the same shit that's happening now. This show gets more viewership than The Dive because we do it live and people watch the Twitch VODs and we have it on Spotify, et cetera, et cetera. This show with 2 webcams. Meanwhile, The Dive is like, they have to have what? They have to have like makeup there. It's like a multi-camera show. They have like a gym. They have like a gym operator. They have a studio set up to get less viewership than us on a show that costs $0 to make it.
Oh, it's honestly
so funny. It's so funny. I don't even understand why they make The Dive because it's such a waste of money.
That's esports industry in a nutshell, though, Monty. Notice what they missed there. The reason this show essentially succeeds in spite of not having the basic production resources is because at its essence, it's got a creative element that is vital, it's essential. What they've done with Riot, Monty, and The Dive, like you say, they've done a cargo cult version of ours. They've gone, right, so what people like is like talk shows. They like hosts. I tell you what, level it up, make the microphones better, it's like, you idiot, you missed the point. Like, essentially, you made a brilliant fucking car with no engine, you moron, and no driver. Like, that's how you fucked yourselves, didn't you?
Well, it's like, they can't possibly get enough sponsorship to cover the costs of running that show.
Way.
And again, like, why even do it? Why even spend the millions of, no joke, guys, because they're paying the talent fees, they're paying all the cameras, they're paying the editors, they're paying the makeup, they're paying lighting, they're paying everything.
Guards, right? Everything. People don't know how expensive it is to do things in real life in that sense. Yeah,
especially in Los Angeles where everyone's unionized. Although Riot doesn't use union people, they don't actually get union rates for that. Anyway, it's an interesting. That
sounds interesting in itself.
It's very interesting. Okay. But yeah, I mean, obviously, like, there's plenty of people here to do these jobs. So there is a demand, right? And people have the opportunity to go select other gigs to do if you just operate a camera, right? And it's not really a shortage of work.
By the way, I've just realized something. That also does the original topic about Reginald and all that stuff. The other thing that was hilarious was this. I actually think the most embarrassing detail about Reginald, everyone else missed, Monty. It's that, here's the thing. I don't think, by the way, this is where I'm a lot fairer than other people, because I know who Reginald is. I don't think Reginald maliciously did all that contract stuff that they were talking about, where, like, technically the people were being treated as if they were salaried employees, but they were also, like, then, like, Reginald was then just giving them, like, contractor status. I don't think Reginald actually did that maliciously. I think Reginald's too stupid to know that there's a legal basis. I think Reginald's the guy where he's like, what do you mean, though? I'm their boss. I'm their boss. I tell them what to do. It's like, that's not actually legally how it works. Actually, like the question, I think he really just thought like, well, of course you have to come in tomorrow. Like, oh, fully fire. And like, it's like, I am like a contractor, Reginald. I would have to, on my desk at 8 in the morning, like, he's just a bozo, isn't he? Like, it's no wonder he fucked that up. Because I thought that was mental itself. Because remember what I said on a few episodes ago when that was leaked? Guys, I don't want people being like, was that a big deal? It's a $400 million valued company, you fucks. If you're going to keep doing those Forbes articles and saying it's real, well, imagine I ran a company that was even $10 million, Monte. People were fucking torturing you over the Renegade stuff. This is a $400 million valued company, and they can't even get basic employment status right. I think that's a pretty big deal. I'd put that top of the list, personally. I think that's more important than busting in like the Kool-Aid man in shitty TSM meetings. That's not really that important an issue, is it? It just ruins the competitive aspect.
I think if you start policing that, then you have to police all of the esports teams that are doing it. Though. Yeah, you probably should, but I'm just saying it's not just TSM. I can tell you it's not just TSM. Back to the dive, though, just briefly. By the way, guys, I don't want you to think that I'm shitting on the quality of the dive or the people on the dive. Like, I think the show's fine. The problem is it's just the cost, right? Like, what I'm saying is that the cost is ridiculous for the return that they're getting on this show when they could just let it be the ecosystem, right? They could just let the ecosystem take care of their podcast problem for them, like we're doing right now, and not spend millions of dollars ridiculously on content that doesn't seem to serve a point when it comes to sponsorship or actually making a profit. Because this is another problem with the LCS overall, is that money could be spent on other things instead that might actually increase viewership to the league, considering there will always be podcasts to fill that hole that you don't have to make. You don't have to make them, right. It's okay. It's okay. Spend your money on doing player storylines instead, please. Would be my advice. I don't know if we're going to get to talking about any of the LCS games this week.
All I'll say is this, like, to be fair, we'll also address this obviously later, like competitive edge or whatever. All you need to know is this, Monte, right? I was watching the games today to do the show, right? But obviously over the weekend, hence why I lost my voice, I've been watching the CSGO tournament, IM Cologne, obviously, and yesterday the match was like 7 hours long, right? While all this was going on, Monte, I was every now and then on the second monitor just checking in on the scores in like LEC. And I saw that even though you could never get this, like, we did that same thing again where we got like amazing bet, but then you got fucked on that bad line. So it's all right. I just chuckled when I saw it.
Got fucked on the Fnatic one.
When I was watching, when I saw like the Baron throw one, the T1 one was a good one as well. The Baron throw, because the problem is I was only laughing because I knew the context that like you would have won the bet otherwise.
The Fnatic game was really the infuriating one, and
for me though, now I get why people enjoy betting and watching it. Except here's the difference: you notice I don't enjoy it as much that I win. I enjoy the Schadenfreude of knowing you're getting wrecked. Like that makes it better for me. So I know.
Well, I mean, it was the TSM FlyQuest one wrecked us too, because
and you do a watch party for it as well, so you must have been mauled, right?
So here's the thing. So by the way, guys, Foxdrop and I were doing a watch party for the Fnatic game, and so we put some prop bets down about like first turret and first to 5 kills. So actually, hilariously, we actually made money in spite of Fnatic losing because our prop bets were good. But it was really infuriating to watch them play so badly with the Caitlyn Morgana and the lead that they had. So yeah, I mean the whole league is just causing everybody to mauled right now. We'll get into that with Kaiser.
One of the craziest weekends I've ever seen in any league, man. That was mental, wasn't it?
It was really surprising. But to touch on LCS real quickly, look, I think we have to talk a little bit before we bring Kaiser on about the EGTL game, because look, man, TL started this split strong, but Hans Sama has been so bad. Especially compared to the form we expect from him on Rogue. And I was having some banter with the EG staff, like Empire and Rigby, their draft coach, which is that in this game, what was so funny to me was that in LCK there was a game where Damwon Kia picked Zillion. So Showmaker picks Zillion into a blind pick Lissandra, because blind pick Lissandra is becoming more popular, especially in Eastern regions. And so I think what was so crazy was that EG's coaching staff knew that if they presented the bait to Bjergsen to be able to pull off the Zillion, because Zillion is good into Lissandra because you can survive, number one, the early game, and then once she hits 6, you can self-ult if she tries to all-in you, so it's a pretty safe lane if you're a good Zillion player. Bjergsen, obviously, legendary Zillion player domestically. But the funny thing is is that when Damwon Kia played it, they played it with an Ophelia, so they had like a late game hyper scaling ADC. And TL swallowed the bait with a Lucian Nami lane. So you have like a low priority mid laner and then a non-scaling AD carry. And then on top of that, Team Liquid, they just died in the early part of the game. So they were just giving advantages over to EG in this bot lane. And by the way, guys, everybody at the end of that game was saying, oh my God, look how good Danny is. Holy shit, he's winning this game. Hello. Danny had the easiest job ever. He was playing Ezreal Yuumi. He had a lead from the start of the game. He's playing into an Aatrox Volibear Zillion Lucian. And the other thing that Showmaker did when he played the Zillion was he didn't buy Everfrost as his mythic. He bought Ludens so he could actually do some damage. Right. So they basically built a no range, no damage composition, which I could play Ezreal with a Yuumi on top of me in that game. Yeah, I'm not saying Danny's not good, guys. Yeah. I'm not saying Danny's not good. I'm just saying that was the freest fucking game of all time for an Ezreal Yuumi. But what's so shocking about Team Liquid is that they got baited into this, number one. Number two, even when they knew they had to have an early game advantage, because this Lucian has to go huge, they allowed Inspired to path into the bot lane faster on Viego and get the kills onto them, and then set their only damage source in this game that was reasonable, because Whipple on Aatrox is never going to get in range when there's a front line of Gnar, Viego, and Lissandra of this Ezreal with a Yuumi on top of him. Like, that's just not going to happen. And then on top of that, they have such low self-awareness, Team Liquid, that they're playing Hansama on the only damage source, which is like, have you been watching his season? So I don't really know what to say about TL right now, because they're getting baited for free. They're picking compositions that I just don't think they can execute with the players in their current form. If anything, I would be prioritizing Bjergsen in the mid lane, but they just baited themselves. I mean, it was really
Here's my angle. This shows you that TL is only a super team on paper. They've never in the server been a super team, Monte. They were fucking dodgy in spring. In the playoffs, they were shit. Now they've been shaky now. The whole time, they've never lived up to it. And here's another reason why you know. Because they were band-aiding the whole time. Remember all those fucking weird games in spring where Bjergsen would be playing the no damage mid laner or the utility mid laner. And everyone was trying to spin it like, oh, it's because he's like coming out of, inactivity, or, well, he's trying to be like a good teammate and set up the teammate and use it. Like, no, I actually think that those were band-aids. Essentially, they were just doing what at the time they thought were the best comps. Like, that's what they thought would win them the game. This implies to me, dude, that their practice must be all over the fucking place. If they end up, that's the conclusion. That's the team you make. Like, remember, if you're a super team, it's the other way around. The reason the G2 super team was the best is because they could flex everything, they could pick everything, they could play everything, they could adapt on a moment, they could do comps they've never ever run before. That's the power of a super team. This is just a flawed team where people don't live up to who they are on paper. Like, dude, with no exaggeration, I think every player of this team is worse than all the other teams I've seen them on. Whippo is probably the closest to good, but even he's not that good. Core JJ is terrible compared to old Core JJ. Hansama's worse, and Bjergsen's a shadow of himself. Santorin's, I guess he's maybe close to what he was. That's about it, though. Like, actually, the whole team's kind of underwhelming if you think about it. They're almost one of those squads where I get the vibe. This is like anti-chemistry. It's like these players don't work when they play together. Like, for me, the Core JJ one was the canary in the coal mine. When I saw that just never, ever improved, I was like, dude, is no one aware? The reason this guy's won all those MVPs is he's basically been the best player in LCS for about 4 years or something mad. And he can't ever work with this ADC. Like, that's getting worrying for me now, mate. Like, I really feel like this team, there's a world where this team, just from this fucked up, like, lack of chemistry, that could actually cost them worlds. I thought that was impossible when this roster was made, mate. Yep. If you'd have told me, I'd have said, guaranteed at least they're getting third. There's like an outside chance they don't go to worlds, mate.
I think there is. I think it's fortunate for Team Liquid that Jensen looks like he's struggling.
It does help. Yes,
it helps
certainly.
A lot. Yeah. And also 100 Thieves looks kind of shaky as well, so it does feel like beyond EG, it is more or less of a grab bag. Like, FlyQuest, every time you think they're good, they just go and get insanely bodied by TSM with this rookie roster, which don't know how that happens, FlyQuest.
You also wouldn't want this TL to go to Worlds, mate. This would do really badly, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would go real badly. And honestly, the most baffling thing about all of this to me is that people are lavishing praise on EG, which is deserved, but it is shocking that EG is the only team that seems to identify a style that they want to play in and be able to see win conditions. Like, TL plays comps and they have no idea how to actually identify win conditions. Sometimes they luck into it, but this game was so clear cut in terms of what they had to do, and Inspired knew exactly what they had to do, and he shut it down. And then there was nothing left for TL. There was no attempt to actually get people properly ahead in this game, and that's not even excusing like Hans Sama's legit super bad team fight play. But EG, I guess they're just going to win based on the virtue that they can identify simple win conditions in their games and play out comps somewhat correctly in spite of potential weaknesses that they might have. So congrats to them, I guess. Like, their coaching staff is certainly doing a good job of that and drafting, but maybe that's all it takes. Maybe that's all it takes to win LCS. Sad. It's really sad to see that we can't have a duel between two teams where they're actually trying to accomplish their own goals. It's just EG accomplishing their goal and the other team just doing nothing, I guess. That's fun, I suppose.
No, to me, that's why, if you notice, the divide in the community continuously between this show and the fans is they just pick the player that got the most kills for EG and go, holy moly, he's good, Batman. Whereas what we do is we go, holy fuck, this coaching staff's shrewd. How do they get
Holy moly, Danny looks good when he has been given every advantage to win this game, and the only guy on the opposing team who can do damage is literally flashing into your front line.
Because, mate, I get the vibe. This reminds me of what happened when I first started getting into the NFL, because it was the same thing. I kept looking, and because the Patriots won so many times and went to the Super Bowl, fans were trying to tell me the players were the best on the Patriots. Like, they were trying to tell me, like, oh, yeah, actually, like, he's mad underrated, Danny Amendola. It's like, look at when he's on teams. He's nobody. It's the other way around, you moron. Obviously, the coaching staff are geniuses. They just know exactly how to use a player like that. They know how, essentially, to strip out all the negatives of that player and only get him to do the things that work for you. That's what EG's showing. That's why, for my money, the real revolution of EG isn't the NA players. That's just sort of the that's the mushroom at the top of the mycelial network. The real revolution is that this is the first team ever, as far as I can tell, where an entire cohesive coaching staff from top to bottom actually has the power to make the practice decisions, the game decisions, the recruitment decisions, and even with lesser resources. That's why the Patriots analogy even works. They're actually better than the bigger teams. Like, the joke is, the fucking Team Liquid, that's got to be like Kansas City or something, mate. You're stacked with talent to the rafters. You've got all the fucking Rams or something. Like, this is ridiculous.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.